Hello to all of you. It's a great pleasure to talk today about Mountain World Heritage Sites and to share with you some of my reflections on this very important topic and very diverse topic. I will start with introducing the topic, in particular the World Heritage mountain properties around the world, and then conservation and management challenges, and share with you some reflections and some conclusions at the end. A mountain is an elevated portion of the Earth's crust and general with steep sides that show significant bedrock which is exposed. Mountains are often considered as a revelation, as transformation of the spirits. And it's against this background that I share with you some of the mountain areas which are protected under the 1972 convention, which is the only legal instrument which covers both the cultural and the natural heritage of this earth. And the convention was adopted in 1972. It was at the time of the first UN conference on the human environment in Stockholm in 1972. But it did not come out of the blue. It was based on the UNESCO experience of the Nubin campaign, which you see on the left-hand side, since the 1960s, safeguarding the temples from Nubia, of the waters of the Aswan Dam, and movements towards an instrument for natural heritage, which came from the US. And here you see the first national park on Earth, Yellowstone National Park, which celebrated its 100th year of establishment. 72. So this is the point where the convention came into being. Now today, with 196 states parties, the convention is unquestionable the most universal legal instrument in heritage conservation globally. And it's no surprise that many mountain areas have been included on the precious World Heritage List, which counts as of July 2024, 1,223 sites in 163 countries. And over the time, the convention evolved considerably from early ideas in the 60s on the beauty and character of landscapes and sites, to the convention itself, a recommendation for the national level, and the evolution with the cultural landscapes categories, which were adopted in 1992. And in 2003, we saw the emergence of a new convention on the intangible cultural heritage. And I will also talk about these linkages. Over 40% of World Heritage sites can be considered in mountainous areas, or many mountain landscapes also illustrate the diversity of the interaction of the people and their environment over time. Now I'm taking you on a trip around landscape and mountain properties all around the world, and we will start with Asia Pacific, with the sacred sites and pilgrimage routes in the key mountain range, where I had the pleasure to work even before it was nominated and inscribed on the World Heritage List in 2004. These are the pilgrimage routes to the ancient capital city of Nara and Kyoto, and they reflect the fusion of the Shinto tradition, which means the nature worship in Japan, and Buddhism. And these sites, these pilgrimage routes, are surrounded by forest landscape, which reflect a tradition of sacred mountains over 1,200 years. The Mount Emei Scenic Area in China is one of Buddhism's most holy sites, which you can see here on the picture. China has 4 sacred mountains, 4 Buddhist sacred mountains, which are among the key sacred mountain sites in the world. And the other one is Mount Taishan, which was inscribed in 1987 on UNESCO's World Heritage List. The Mount Tai, because Shan is means mountain, is an object of imperial cult for nearly 2,000 years and includes artistic masterpieces in a perfect harmony with the natural landscape. And it was always a source of inspiration for Chinese artists and scholars, and symbolizes the ancient Chinese civilization and belief system. Here we go to Australia, to Uluru-Kata-Tjuta National Park, which is an immense monolith, and the rock domes located west of Uluru-Kata-Tjuta, they form part of the traditional belief system of one of the oldest human societies in the world. And I had the pleasure to work there when it became a cultural landscape in 1994, and when the Anangu, the traditional owners, went into co-management of the site, it changed totally their relation to Parks Australia, and enabled them to tell the story from their worldview to visitors who come and who are interested. Now, Tongariro National Park in New Zealand are at the heart of the park, the Tongariro Mountain, and this mountain has a cultural and religious significance for the Maori people. It symbolizes the spiritual link between this community and the environment. It's, so to say, the most sacred mountain for all the Maori people. And it was the very first cultural landscape inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage List. It also has an active and extinct volcanoes and a diverse range of ecosystems and spectacular landscapes, which are managed by the Maori people. If we move to India, Nanda Devi and Valley of the Flowers National Parks is a very interesting area. It's richly diverse between the mountain ranges of the Zanskar and Great Himalaya, and it's praised by botanists and mountaineers for over a century, and was an important, or is still an important site for Hindu mythology for a long time. If we move to another site in India, this is Kanchenjunga National Park. I had the pleasure to inaugurate this and celebrate with the Indian people the inscription of the site on the World Heritage List in 2016. It's a site which is recognized for both the culture and the natural values, and it's the third highest peak of we have on Earth. And this mountain is related to a lot of stories and rituals, and the mountain and natural elements, so caves and rivers and lakes, are worshipped by the indigenous peoples of Sikkim. And the sacred meanings of these stories and practices have been integrated with Buddhist beliefs and constitute the basis for Sikkimese identity. Let us move now to a site you all know. You all know Mount Everest, of course. This has been included as Sagarmatha National Park from Nepal in 1979, so very early on. It's the highest peak in the world, and it includes several rare species, such as the snow leopard, and pandas are found in this area, but it's very much known by mountaineers around the world. The next site is in the Arab region. There we have a number of very interesting areas. One of my favorite is Kadisha Valley, the Holy Valley in the Forest of the Feathers of God, in Lebanon in 1998 inscribed. And it's a relatively small area, so it was not possible to get it on the World Heritage List for its natural features, but it's a cultural landscape. And it's one of the most important early Christian monastic settlements in the world. And the monasteries, many of which are of great age, stand in dramatic positions in a rugged landscape, and nearby are the remains of the great forest of cedars of Lebanon, already mentioned in the Bible. Here you see some of the cedar trees. There are remains from the forest, which is renowned since antiquity, and you all know the Epic of Gilgamesh, excuse me, which makes reference to this forest and describes the cedars as sacred trees. Kadisha Valley has been a place of meditation and refuge of Christian, eremitic, and monastic foundations, and the sacred valley is in itself an invitation to meditation and prayer. Another area, which is not far away, it's the St. Catherine area in Egypt. And the Orthodox monastery at the foot of Mount Horeb, where the Old Testament records Moses received the tablets of the law. The mountain is known and revered by Muslims as Jebel Musa, and the entire area is sacred to three world religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. The monastery, founded in the 6th century, is the oldest Christian monastery still in use with its initial function. Jebel Bakal and the sites of the Napatan region are in Sudan and very much threatened by the current ongoing war. And since antiquity, the hill of Jebel Bakar has been strongly associated with different religious traditions, and the largest temples are still considered by the local people as sacred places. And now let's move to an area in Jordan, which probably many of you know. I had the pleasure to work there in 2018 in this 74,000 hectare property towards the border to Saudi Arabia. It's a mixed cultural natural site, and it features a very varied desert landscape. There are lots of petroglyphs and archaeological remains which show us 12,000 years of human occupation and interaction with the natural environment. And some of the key issues I have been working on was uncontrolled tourism and to improve the relations with the local community so that they can benefit from the tourism in this area. Let's move to Africa. Some of you may know Mount Kenya, which is the mountain of brightness, and is related to the origin story of the Kikuyu. It plays a central role in ceremonies, and it's the second highest peak in Africa. There are 12 remnant glaciers, which you see here on the pictures on the mountain, but they are receding rapidly, and this is one of the most impressive landscapes in East Africa. There's another one, Kilimanjaro National Park, which is in Tanzania and inscribed in 1987. It's the highest point in Africa with 5,895 meters. And it's an ancient volcano. It stands in splendid isolation above the surrounding plains. And we all know the story of Hemingway's The Snows of Kilimanjaro, which opens with a reference to Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa, whose western summit is called in Maasai the House of God. We move south in Africa to Botswana, where we see Tsodilo, which was inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage List in 2001. It is one of the highest concentrations of rock art on these rocks you see here in the picture in the world, and therefore it has been called the Louvre of the desert. Over 4,500 paintings are preserved in the Kalahari Desert, and the archaeological record gives a chronological account of human activities and environmental changes over the last 100,000 years. We are moving now to Europe to look at Garraf-Onay National Park. I know the park extremely well because I have been learning Spanish for over 10 years every Christmas for 2 weeks on this small island. So I was hiking all around the national park, and the laurel forest covers some 70% of this park. You see on the other side the Teide on Tenerife. Now, the presence of springs and streams results in quite a lush vegetation resembling that of the tertiary, which due to climatic changes has largely disappeared in southern Europe. And you can still find it here in the Azores and on the Canary Islands. While this site was recognized as a natural site, very recent archaeological research has shown the importance for the local people, including archaeological excavations of objects and colors used for rituals. And so you can imagine that some of these mountains, the Teide and Tenerife, but also the Garrajo were places of worship and rituals in the ancient tradition. On the Gran Canaria island, next door, so to say, recently in 2019, a sacred mountain was inscribed, the Risco Paido, in the Gran Canaria cultural landscape in Spain, and it's located in the center of Gran Canaria, in a landscape of rich biodiversity, but it has also a number of troglodyte settlements of pre-Hispanic cultures, which evolved in isolation. So the North African Berbers came over to the Canary Islands, and they used these cavities and temples, they are called in Spanish almogarines, and they were seasonal ceremonies held in these caves. And these are thought to be linked to a possible cult of the stars and Mother Earth. Actually, on the Canary Islands, you have a fantastic view of the starlight at night. So I strongly believe that it was used for these purposes. You have lots of abbeys all over Europe, but this one on a hill in Hungary is the first Benedictine monk settlement in 996. And this has promoted culture and religion throughout Central Europe. So some of these mountains were also monastery places, as we can see in the next slides as well. When we come to Greece. But first we go to Italy, because Mount Etna is such an iconic site. It's the highest Mediterranean island mountain and the most active stratovolcano in the world. And this history of volcanism has been documented for 2,700 years. Also in Roman mythology, the god Vulcan, which was the god of blacksmithing, had his forge under Mount Etna. And the volcano is also known as Monte Bello in Sicilian and Mongibello or Montebello in Italian, which means literally beautiful mountain. As I said, we have many monasteries across the world on mountains. For example, Mount Athos in Greece, which has been Orthodox spiritual center since 1054. And it has a very specific autonomous status since Byzantine times. It's a holy mountain forbidden to women and children, and a recognized artistic site, and the layout of the monasteries had an influence globally and on the school of painting in the history of Orthodox art. Similarly, we have monks who settled on these columns of the sky in Meteora in Greece from the 11th century onwards, and 24 of these monasteries were built despite incredibly difficulties of the terrain, and their 16th century frescoes mark a key stage in the development of post-Byzantine painting. And this one can be visited by women, I can assure you. Another one which is quite famous is Mont Saint-Michel and its bay, which was listed in 1979. And it's on a very rocky islet exposed to powerful tides. It's called the Wonder of the West, Benedictine Abbey dedicated to the Archangel St. Michael. And it was built between the 11th and 16th century, and adapting to the main key problems posed by this unique natural site. And I was digging out a drawing from the 10th century, which was restituted in 1910, because we saw the celebration last year of the 100th anniversary of Mont Saint-Michel, the 1000th anniversary of Mont Saint-Michel. Now, moving to Latin America, to the Americas, it's the historic sanctuary of Machu Picchu, which is probably the most well-known, which is located in a tropical mountain forest, which is an extraordinarily beautiful setting and probably the most amazing urban creation of the Inca Empire at its height. The natural setting encompasses the upper Amazon basin, which is rich diversity of flora and fauna. So it's a mixed natural and cultural site for both the natural environment and the incredible constructions you see here. Another site which I cherish a lot in Latin America is the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. It's a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve since '79, and it's on the tentative list for future World Heritage listing. And the snowy peaks of this mountain are considered sacred. A number of indigenous peoples, including the Arhuaco, the Kogi, and the Viva, live in indigenous reserves. And they develop a policy for the recovery of their ancestral lands in order to strengthen their culture and assist their traditional conservation practices. And I have met the Kogi for a number of times, the Kogi leaders. They even came to a conference we organized in Tokyo in 2005, but they came also to visit me in Paris, in my office at the time, and they prepare a nomination involving the indigenous community. So here on the photo, you see two of the leaders. They have a very unique worldview. It's called Cosmovision, connected to their sacred ancestral territory, to their traditions and languages, and their system of knowledge, which was also inscribed on UNESCO's representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 22. And there you see again these links between the tangible and the intangible heritage. And it's very important to recognize the fundamental role this ancestral wisdom is playing in the protection of the Sierra Nevada ecosystems and avoiding the loss of the cultural identity of the peoples in this area. Now I come to one of my favorite sites, one of the most fascinating sites inscribed in recent years, actually in 2018. It's the largest protected area in Colombia. The Chiriquí National Park is in the confluence point of 4 biogeographical provinces of the Amazon, the Andes, the Orinoco, and the Guyana. And one of the defining features is the presence of teepees, table mountains, which you see here in these pictures. They are sandstone plateaus that outstand the forest and result in a very dramatic scenery that is reinforced by its remoteness and inaccessibility, so you cannot visit it, and it has an exceptional conservation. One of the features is these incredible pictures. Over 75 figures have been recorded to be made by indigenous peoples on the walls of 60 rock shelters dating from 20,000 BC and they are still made nowadays by uncontacted peoples protected by the national park. Now, these pictures depict hunting scenes, battles, dances, ceremonies, but also flora and fauna of the area, including the jaguar, of course. And the jaguar is worshipped as a symbol of power and fertility. The indigenous communities, which are not directly present at site, so they come and go, consider Chiribikete as a sacred place that cannot be visited and that should be preserved unaltered. Now, I had the pleasure to attend a film session. There was a film shown about this site in Paris at the museum, with some of the people who discovered the rock art site by chance, including the Colombian archaeologist Uribe. Carlos Castaño Uribe is behind the discovery and protection of Chiribikete National Park, and found many of the rupestral drawings and objects. Over 30 years, this anthropologist and archaeologist from Bogota has kept this secret that has amazed the scientific world. It is the biggest discovery in cave painting in the whole archaeological world. And it's the place where probably the first pictorial murals of America were made. In this territory, there are still tribes that have not had any contact with white people. Now, this was my tour around the world, and I would like now to come to some points on conservation, management, and threats, because mountains are often viewed as a source of power, and therefore these areas have been preserved over time and can be centerpieces of conservation today. But often access to these mountains, is restricted, and climbing and other activities have been banned. And some areas remain conserved because of that. Later, national and international designations continued the protection of these precious sites with relatively low levels of utilization and high biocultural diversity. Today, the value of mountain sites for conservation and of ecosystems, biodiversity, and cultural diversity is recognized globally. And Verschuren, a couple of years ago, argued that the cultural, spiritual, philosophical underpinnings of these sites can make conservation more effective and more sustainable. I'm very pleased that there was a considerable evolution in terms of guidance concerning management and conservation of mountains as well as sacred mountains. For example, you see here the Sacred Natural Sites Guidelines for Protected Area Management have been produced, as well as a series of other guidance. This is absolutely necessary, as we see that many communities live in a fragile and very rough environment, and they suffer. Here you see the people from Maymand in a semi-arid valley in Iran's central mountains. And they are nomadic or semi-nomadic agro-pastoralists, raising their animals on mountain pastures and living in temporary settlements. And during the winter, they are in cave dwellings, as the one you see here on the picture. And it's a landscape which is an example of a system which was widespread in the past, in the history of mankind, and involves the movement of both people and animals. And I think that living in harmony with nature is really key to preserve these fragile mountain environments, but also their peoples. Many of the places and mountain areas, however, experience serious issues related to tourism. Both international and national visitors, tourists, and pilgrims which come to these places and mountains for very diverse reasons. Here you see Saint-Michel, Mount Saint-Michel with at least 1.5 to 2 million visitors per year, Mount Emai, 3.5 to 3, around to 4 million per year. This is not only a challenge for local communities, but also for those managing these areas. And while the COVID-19 pandemic put tourism to a halt in 2020, increasing tourism to mountain areas, especially people were looking for natural places, can be observed in 2022 again. Therefore, working towards sustainable tourism models was enhanced since the adoption of the World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism Program in 2012. So new ways of tourism management with local communities have to be found, such as co-management of national parks. Also, communication with visitors and communities is critical, and therefore we have made a specific guidance of the tourism by the tourism program. The so-called how-to guides were developed and focused on best practice approaches to sustainable economic development through tourism. These resources offer guidance for managers and other stakeholders to help to identify the most suitable solutions for circumstances in their local environments and aid in developing general know-how for the management of each destination. Another challenge, which is probably the most critical of our times, is increasing climate change, and I would say the climate crisis. It's the most important threat to all the World Heritage sites, but especially to mountain areas, their natural environment and cultural associations. This is the case for all regions of the world, including especially glacier regions. But here you see a deadly glacial outburst at Nanda Devi National Park. About 200 people died. And on the African continent, we experience extreme weather events such as droughts and flooding. For example, we intervened here in Sudan at Jebel Barkal and financed through the Emergency Heritage Fund a mission to help the authorities. But at the moment in Sudan, things are going from worse to worse because of the war. As I said, guidance is available, but especially guidance also on how to deal with climate change. A new policy has been adopted in 2023 by all the 196 countries of the World Heritage Convention. And there is also specific guidance available on World Heritage glaciers. Now let me come to some reflections and considerations and conclusions. I think that mountains are a constant source of inspiration, identity, and heritage. And I'm eternally grateful for my 30 years of work at UNESCO, having met so many people cherishing their heritage and so many outstanding and often sacred places. The interest in World Heritage and the World Heritage List has really increased over time. And I was quite impressed with the wealth of information, of research and guidance available today for mountains and World Heritage mountains and their communities. Let me therefore conclude my reflection with the following points. The evolution in the interpretation of the World Heritage Convention has grown considerably, and we have seen an enhanced diversity of types of sites and concepts, but also the pride of the people for their sites. They are really proud to share their heritage. Mountain sites and communities are extremely vulnerable. Increasing awareness among the stakeholders, including managers and politicians, about mountain sites' integrity and their protection is really required. We have seen there are growing threats which have been identified, including overtourism and climate change impacts, to mention only a few. And guidance and tools is now available. Updates in the future should include new management practices. And I believe strongly in sharing experiences in addressing new challenges, including effective visitor management to assist site managers, local communities, and indigenous peoples as well. And finally, the protection of mountain areas and their sacred places has an overall benefit for our biocultural diversity for tomorrow's world. These reflections are based on a chapter in the recent Montology palimpsest book, which you see here on the left-hand side, but I also reference a chapter I wrote on World Heritage and Tourism in a new book which came out, Evolving Heritage Conservation Practice in the 21st Century. And I share with you those links so that you can look at the text if you wish. And thank you very much to all of you. I close with a picture, one of the very early photos of Mount Fuji, which was ever taken and which you can find in the Les Archives de la Planète in Paris, in the Albert Kahn Gardens, just outside of Paris. So thank you very much, and it was a great pleasure to share these reflections with you.
Thank you so much, Mechtild. So good. So now we have some more time here, and the idea is to open this up for questions and discussion and comments. So let's see. Is there anybody that wants to contribute here or have a question or comment? Sandy, you have to unmute.
Doing that right now. Okay, thanks. Oh, Mechtild, thank you so much. Really wonderful to hear you, see you, and also get this overview. You know, you did such a stellar job at our triennial at Asilomar. Or was it way back when in 2017? So this felt like it was, you know, rounding things out a bit. Really, just my most immediate thing is to, I didn't catch the references, you know, to the two chapters. I was going to do a screenshot and then it changed, capture. So can we post that somewhere or have it?
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to make this available to everybody, the whole presentation. This is one reason that Mechtild recorded it, was so that we could make that available to everyone. And we will post that. I think we'll post a link through Facebook, and I'm not sure if we can make this available on a YouTube site. I think SWG actually does have a YouTube site, but anyway, we will definitely make it available. So this, because there's so many valuable things in here to go back
and I
to.
can put it in the chat, Barbara, if you want.
Oh yeah, please do that. Do that right now if you can. That'd be great. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Libby.
I just thank you so much. This was so great and inspiring. It seems like what you're dealing with are just now sort of universal problems with overtourism, with climate change, and this so many countries are working on all these things independently. And you seem like UNESCO is now like information central on this and sort of almost a clearinghouse. Do you feel that UNESCO is at the forefront in research in all these areas, that other places can come to you and see what you're doing?
That's a good question, Libby, but you know, UNESCO is not doing research itself. We are only a few people on permanent staff, But what we do, we collect the research which is out there and bring it into policy. So that's what we did when we worked, for example, on climate change. And I, as a director of the World Heritage Center, I chaired a meeting with experts, 2 experts per country for over 1 year to draft the climate change policy so that it was acceptable for the countries. That is sometimes quite hard, you know, because if you have read the research, you would like to go much faster than some of the countries. And I was really blocked at the time, I can say that now, among ourselves, by Australia, because they didn't want to have the discussion on danger listing because of climate change for the Great Barrier Reef. And that was all over the press, and they always said this is a plot against us and so. But actually in the group, the expert group, they had fantastic scientists. And when I came in 21 to the committee and I said this needs to be danger listed, the Great Barrier Reef, I quoted only documents which were produced by the Australians themselves. And despite that, they fought it very hard. So that's the big difficulty if you're an intergovernmental system. Now I'm free because I am retired since 21. Now I can be much more open than I was before. But as you say, we bring the science together. So for example, that one book is on World Heritage glaciers. It brings the data together and transforms it, both in English and French, into a readable document also for policymakers. And that's the, if you want, it's a kind of go-between. Because the science sometimes is I'm a scientist myself, but you need to talk to policymakers, especially when you talk about climate change. So you need to write in a different way. I hope I've answered, Libby.
It's so interesting. And yes, and I do remember the issue over the Great Barrier Reef. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Sally.
Has the mountaineering community been approached about this? And as far as integrating their interest in climbing versus indigenous concepts?
Yes. Yeah. That's a very good point, Sally, because the Mountology book where this chapter is, it's practically a lot of mountaineering community also publishing in there. And there is an exchange. Sometimes it's very difficult to make them accept not to climb a certain mountain. You will find in that book, which is, by the way, totally online on sacred sites, you will find examples. I experienced the one with Uluru Kata Tuta, with Ayers Rock, because the Anangu don't want you to climb the rock. Why do they say that? Very openly, by the way. Because it's very hot on the rock, and every year several people die, and that gives bad spirits. So they just don't want you to climb the rock. They want you to walk around the rock, and there are still some people who want to climb. But now, when we change the management of the site with co-management, now there are very interesting tours which you can do early in the morning with indigenous peoples, where they explain about the sacred places and why they don't want you to climb. So I think we are moving towards more understanding in the mountaineering community also.
Good. I wonder, because there's the American Alpine Club has something called the Access Fund, and they're always pushing to have more access to climbing areas. And of course, there's a detriment there of individuals coming in to climb, putting self ahead of whatever the indigenous folks are thinking.
Yeah.
At any rate,
It's
thank you.
definitely an issue of trying to find a way to live together. Verna Lee, you had a question?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Werner. Around like 20 years ago, I actually climbed Mount Kilimanjaro of Tanzania. So I'm wondering, I'm sorry for this seminar, I missed the first several minutes if I missed your introduction. So is UNESCO doing anything to protect Mount Kilimanjaro? Because before climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, I actually climbed another mountain twice within 10 years, and I literally witnessed from personal experience the glacier retreating. It's way more difficult to climb with the ice rather than stepping on snow. So can you share with us anything, if UNESCO is doing anything to protect Mount Kilimanjaro? Thank you.
Yes, we have an office which is based in Nairobi, which deals with Kilimanjaro and Mount Kenya and all the other protected areas. So this is a site which is being protected under the World Heritage Convention, and for developing countries we do projects. So there were projects. I remember one at Mount Kenya, but there were several projects at Mount Kilimanjaro to improve the management, to improve also visitors, to manage the trails better, etc. So I don't know when you were there, you might have not seen that, but we do a lot of training of site managers. That was one of the big issues I have always been dealing with. And around 2000, we created the African World Heritage Fund, which is based in South Africa, which does training all around the African continent. It includes also the Arab region. And so the site managers are now better trained. They know how to improve the interpretation of the site. This includes also if there are some sacred places they don't want you to go. But I have to say, and this is why I underlined the issue of climate change and the fragility of mountain areas. The big issue is you may not be able to climb in the future certain areas. It starts in the Alps because, and in practically all the high mountain regions, because the permafrost will be gone. The glaciers are retreating. You cannot hike on the glacier anymore. There are lots of mudslides. We had the whole landslides. We had lots of landslides in the Alps. We have lots of stones breaking up, and it will be more and more difficult actually to hike in these areas. So the safety of the tourists is one of the big issues in all of these mountain areas.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really good. Thank you.
Sandy.
Unmuted again. A question that I have, Mechtild, I recently, well, the last couple, 2-3 years, learned more about an organization called World Monuments Fund. And I was just wondering, what's the relationship between UNESCO, something like that, and if this is kind of a phenomenon emerging of other independent organizations sort of doing aspects, or how, if you collaborate, what's this relationship between these perhaps new organizations and UNESCO?
I know the World Monuments Fund very well because they called me in some of their selection of the threatened sites because I knew many of these sites, so they call in UNESCO staff to analyze the dossiers they get. The World Monuments Fund is a private foundation. We have many of such organizations, and UNESCO was in the beginning very careful because it was not the easiest of all relationships with there's another one, the Global Heritage Fund. There are many of these organizations. Nowadays, it's much easier. We have a collaboration with the World Monuments Fund and all the other organizations, because the money which is out there to safeguard heritage is not enough. So that means we all need to work together. UNESCO works especially with the government. So many of our funding comes actually from governments. So I got a lot of money from Germany and from other European countries to invest in World Heritage sites all around the world. But this was government funding or EU funding. I got per year, I got about 28 million dollars for the safeguarding of World Heritage site, which is absolutely not enough. So we are pleased to have a number of these private foundations. There's another one, it's called ALIF, which operates in conflict and war zones. So I work a lot with them as well. They work mainly with the Hague Convention on heritage in times of armed conflict. And so we work with all these organizations, but we at UNESCO, I always say I'm no longer there, but 30 years made my life, so to say. The difference is that UNESCO is intergovernmental. And we don't work in certain areas. For example, we don't work in Taiwan because Taiwan is not a UN member. So there are limits to the areas we can work in, and these foundations can work anywhere. For example, the Antarctica cannot be under UNESCO because it's not a country. As a separate treaty, as Maria Pia knows very well. So, for example, the World Monuments Fund can easily work on Shackleton's hut, while we could have never done that because it's not in a physical country.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And also Antarctica not being a country, and despite the claims that are all frozen because of the Antarctic Treaty. So God knows what's going to happen with the glaciers. They would need protection, but who's there to protect them? Because not being inhabited, it's a real complication. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else here?
Yes.
Any
yes,
more comments?
Yes,
Maria Pia, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, just a question. If it doesn't take too long, what is the actual process whereby a site becomes a UNESCO site? Do they, I remember you talking about it in Asilomar, but for the people who were not there, it might be interesting to see how all these sites become part of the protection, and whether it's them asking and whether it's a long process, or if it
it's a
doesn't
very
take too
long
long.
process.
Right.
I have seen
Okay.
sites, Maria Pia, for example, the Aletsch Glacier. It was the idea of a person who has a restaurant near the Aletsch Glacier who said this needs to go on UNESCO's World Heritage List.
Right.
And from the first idea to the inscription, it took 25 years. Now, but in essence, the answer is it's a government to nominate a site.
Okay.
But often in mountain areas, there will be a film coming out next year in which I participated on the Pyrenees. It was actually a mountaineer in the Pyrenees, Patrice de Belfond, who had the first idea to nominate an area. So he founded an association, and then he went to the French government and said, we would like to have this area protected by UNESCO, but together with our Spanish friends. And it's now a transboundary World Heritage Site in the Pyrenees. So it depends on the situation. I love it actually when it's local communities, because it's their heritage. So they need to agree to be nominated also. In some cases, the governments didn't consult. I remember I had once in my office 25 people from hotel owners from Korea protesting against the nomination of a mountain from South Korea, saying because UNESCO will make too many restrictions and people cannot come anymore and so on. And then in the end, the Korean government didn't go for it, you see, because it was too complicated. They didn't do it.
Right. Yeah, because it comes with some sort of rules to be part of it. Right. Thank you. So it's very different, in fact, depending on the sites and where they are. It's interesting.
But you know, Italy is always different. I remember I did a workshop at Mount Etna, and I opened the newspaper the next morning, and it said, experts inscribe Mount Etna on the World Heritage List, which was not the case, but
that would be
very funny.
Misinformation, right? Going on, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, any more comments, questions? Sandy?
Yes, when are you going to come back to the West Coast, Mechtild?
I would love to come back, but definitely with Maria Pia, we are in the Centennial Committee. So when we celebrate in Washington, I will certainly come back to the West Coast as well, and love to see you again there.
Good.
Sally?
I'd like to make a clarification on the election task force. There's the president-elect, the treasurer, and there are 8 board member slots open for applications.
Okay, thank you. And as Sally said, we're looking for 10 new people. So that's a lot of people. And I'm hoping that people will really spread the word and find some volunteers here. We really would like to expand the involvement of everyone in the organization.
Thank you.
So thank you, Sally. So Mechtild, this has just been great. We will post your presentation, and one idea for the Centennial Committee here is that if we can do something similar with other presentations, that we could make these available during the Centennial for folks. So I'm hoping that that will be possible. Okay. Okay, well, thank you to everyone for participating. It's been really great.
Hey,
lovely to see you all.
Thank you, Mechtild. Thank you so much.
Hey, I'm sorry. It's Verna here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a last question from me. I suddenly remember. I know there's some sites underwater that's under UNESCO too. But you know, I didn't spend enough time to know more. Can you brief us on, you know, some like iconic UNESCO sites that are underwater?
Yes, but it's a different program. It's the Underwater Cultural Heritage Convention, and it's not specific sites, although areas are protected by each of the countries. And I am looking at Barbara because actually we were working together on one of these sites, because for 4 years I was also responsible for the 2001 convention on the underwater cultural heritage. And
Barbara
in Greece lives near one of the most amazing areas. I can
only
recommend to go there. It's a city in Greece which is totally underwater, and I was snorkeling above the main road. Maybe Barbara, you talk a little about that site, which is fantastic.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, this is Pavlo Petri, which is located on the eastern finger of the Peloponnese. It's a city that's about 5,000 years old, so it's from the early Bronze Age. And excuse me, it's at the same period of time as the Minoan culture. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm coughing here.
Take your time.
But it's very accessible because, as Mechtild said, the city basically sank about 3 meters below the surface and over a period of several thousand years. So it wasn't sinking quickly, but once it had sunk for about a meter or more, the city was eventually abandoned. But one of the good things is that meant nobody built anything on top of it. Because in so many archaeological sites, there's many, many layers of ruins and different levels of civilization, but not at Pablo Petri, because nothing was built on top of it. Now, the buildings themselves were mostly built out of adobe, and so all of that has disappeared. But what is left are the foundations. So what we see are the foundations of the buildings, the roads. There's some very impressive chamber tombs there. And one hope that we had, the group of us that were working on trying to protect Pablo Petri, was that it might one day become a World Heritage Site. But as Mechtild says, this has to be supported by the government. And the Greek government really is not in a position to support Pablo Petri for becoming a World Heritage Site. Just to comment with Sandy here, the World Heritage Fund did recognize Pablo Petri as one of its endangered sites. And so we were
Monuments.
We were
World
called
Monuments Fund.
World Monuments Fund, sorry. The World Monuments Fund runs a program that they call their watch list. And every year they accept applications from sites that are endangered and put them on a list. And so we did get Pablo Petri. Pablo Petri was recognized. It was on the World Monuments Fund watch list from 2000, I think it was 15 to 17. And so that was very helpful to us because that gave kind of a new international recognition to the site. But it's definitely a place that I would recommend visiting. And of course, I live right there. So Bernalee, when you decide to come, you've got your SWG connections right there. So let me know.
Thank you so much for being so inviting. Yeah, many years ago, I was in visit the Greek islands. So I really like Greece. I thank you so much for sharing. I actually I remember reading a magazine showing there's I think it's a UNESCO underwater site that's in Japan, south of Japan. I'm thinking I'm a now scuba diver. So as a diver, can we dive around it, or what's the any rules? I've never seen like articles mentioning can divers be around, or what can you share anything with us?
No, there are rules. There's also guidance. If you go to the UNESCO webpage to underwater heritage, there is guidance, especially, most of the areas which are protected under the 2001 convention, it's not sites, it's movable heritage. The ocean is the biggest museum on Earth. So most of these are shipwrecks. And there is specific guidance for divers as well. So just Google UNESCO Underwater Cultural Heritage and you will find this guidance.
Okay, good. Good to know. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Because I've seen it like a underwater, like a city basically sunk underwater, so it's very interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any further comments, contributions?
It was wonderful. Thank you. And it's so good to see you all.
It's great to see you,
Susan.
Thank you. This was really fascinating. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you to all for participating. I think this was great. It's our first corresponding members Zoom meeting like this. I know that Markie Hunsiger was here just briefly. I noticed, and it was really her idea to have this idea of an October book event. And the idea was that each of the different groups would sort of feature a book written by one of their members. And so I know that the Chicago group is featuring a book this month for their meeting, which I think is next Saturday. And Libby, I have not heard from you about San Francisco. I know that your meeting is not in October, it's in November. Are you planning to feature a book in November?
Actually, I had written to you about this, and because we did get a response, and I'll write to you again about it.
Okay. So we're really trying to sort of get more people together, and I just love this concept of getting people together via Zoom meetings. It's very effective. Makes me really happy. Happy to see you all.
Yes.
Okay, so anyway, thank you, and we'll be in touch. And as I said, we will post Mechtild's presentation. I don't know exactly how that works. Maybe Deborah, maybe you know better than I do about the Facebook page. Deborah's on our communications and engagement committee. Can you unmute, Deborah? Deborah, can you unmute,
Oh,
please?
sorry. Yeah. Joanna Kafarowski is the one to contact about that because she does the posting for that.
Right. Okay. No, I knew that.
But I think, well, actually, I think that any of us who are members of that page can post on it.
Yes.
Well, what I know, I think it always has to go through Joanna. So when I want to post something on the page, I send it to Joanna and she puts it up.
Okay.
And I'm not sure whether what we're going to post on the Facebook page is a link or exactly how that works. But we want to make Mechtild's presentation available to everybody, and and especially to those who weren't able to join us here today. So, hi Verna.
Hi, Verna.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for participating, and we'll hopefully see you again in December at our next meeting. That would be great.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye now. Bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye.